night was thick with silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Malik Carter moved through the dimly lit alley, his footsteps controlled, his senses sharp. Something about tonight felt different, like the air itself carried a warning. His eyes darted to the side, scanning the darkness between the buildings. Nothing. Just the wind rattling an old metal sign. He kept walking, his muscles tight with anticipation. Years of experience taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, they screamed at him to stay alert. As he neared the end of the alley, he heard a soft shuffle, barely noticeable but enough to send a chill down his spine. He stopped, listened. The city's usual noise faded, leaving only the sound of his own steady breathing. Then, out of the corner of his eye movement, a shadow slipped behind a dumpster. Someone was there, watching. Malik didn't panic, he never did. Instead, he turned slowly, his stance shifting, ready for whatever was coming. Whoever was out there had just made a mistake. Malik wasn't the type of man to be taken by surprise. Malik didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the shadow behind the dumpster. The city noise faded, leaving only the sound of distant traffic and the faint rustle of garbage in the wind. The presence in the dark wasn't just passing through. Someone was waiting, watching. Malik's grip tightened. His instincts screamed he wasn't alone. Then, the figure stepped out. A tall man with a smug grin, dressed in dark clothes, his posture too relaxed. "Didn't think we'd meet like this, did you?" he said, voice laced with confidence. Malik didn't answer. He was too busy noticing the details, the slight bulge in the man's jacket, the way his weight shifted like he was waiting for backup. Footsteps. More figures emerged from the shadows. 1, 2, 3, 4 men now surrounding him. A setup. Malik exhaled slowly. They thought numbers gave them power. "Hand over your wallet," the leader said. "Make this easy." Malik's lips curled slightly, not quite a smile, but close. He glanced at each man, noting their stances, their weaknesses. They didn't know who they were dealing with. The first attacker lunged, swinging wildly. Malik sidestepped, grabbing his arm and twisting. A sharp cry broke the silence as the man dropped. The others hesitated. Their plan had just fallen apart. Malik straightened, eyes cold. "You should have walked away." The alley fell silent, except for the groans of the man Malik had just taken down. The remaining 3 hesitated, glancing at each other, their confidence flickering. They hadn't expected a fight. They definitely hadn't expected this. One of them snarled, pulling out a knife. "You're dead," he spat, lunging forward. The blade sliced through the air, fast but not fast enough. Malik shifted to the side, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting. The knife clattered to the ground as its owner yelped in pain. The other 2 took that as their cue. They rushed him at once, fists flying. Malik ducked under the first swing, slamming his elbow into one attacker's ribs. A sharp gasp escaped as the man stumbled back. The second thug managed to grab Malik's jacket, but before he could react, Malik spun, using the momentum to throw him into the dumpster with a loud crash. The gang leader, still standing, watched with wide eyes. His men, who had outnumbered their target, were now groaning on the pavement. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Malik turned toward him, his expression unreadable. "You want to try next?" Malik asked, voice calm, almost amused. The leader stiffened. His fingers twitched at his side, like he was debating pulling a weapon. But he knew he'd lost control of this fight before it even started. Malik took a step closer. The leader flinched. The gang leader stood frozen, his mind racing. His men lay groaning on the ground, and the man he had expected to break was standing tall, barely winded. Fear clawed at his pride, but he refused to back down. His fingers twitched toward his belt. He still had a weapon, a small blade, hidden just enough to give him one last shot. Maybe Malik wouldn't see it coming. Malik, however, did see. His sharp gaze flickered to the leader's hand. "Don't," he warned, his voice steady. "Walk away." The pride was louder than reason. The leader let out a growl, ripping the knife free and charging forward with reckless fury. He swung fast, aiming for Malik's chest, but his desperation made him sloppy. Malik sidestepped with ease, catching the leader's wrist mid-swing. A quick twist, and the knife fell with a metallic clatter. Before the leader could react, Malik struck a sharp, controlled hit to the ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. The gang leader stumbled, gasping, but Malik wasn't done. He swept his leg forward, sending his opponent crashing onto his back. The fight was over before it even started. Silence. The remaining gang members scrambled to their feet, wide-eyed and terrified. They didn't need another warning. One by one, they bolted down the alley, disappearing into the night. Malik exhaled, adjusting his jacket as he stepped over the fallen leader. "Next time," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else, "pick a different target." The gang leader groaned, dragging himself up from the ground, his pride wounded more than his body. He couldn't believe what had just happened. His men, his best fighters, were either down or too scared to move. But he wasn't ready to accept defeat. His hand slid toward his boot, where a small gun was tucked away. One shot, just one, and he could end this. Malik caught the movement instantly. His gaze sharpened. "Think carefully," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Is this really worth it?" The leader's fingers hesitated over the weapon. His breathing was ragged, his heart pounding, but his rage drowned out reason. With a snarl, he yanked the gun free and aimed. He never got the chance to fire. Malik moved like a shadow, silent, precise. His foot slammed into the leader's wrist, sending the gun flying. Before the leader could react, Malik struck again, a swift punch to the chest that knocked him backward. He hit the ground hard, gasping for breath, his body refusing to move. The rest of the gang stood frozen, their confidence shattered. They had never seen their leader lose, let alone be humiliated like this. Malik stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over them. "Anyone else?" His voice was quiet, but the power in it was undeniable. No one dared to answer. One by one, they turned and ran, their footsteps echoing into the night. Malik exhaled slowly, looking down at the fallen leader. "Some people never learn," he muttered, adjusting his jacket. He turned and walked away, leaving behind a clear message: this was his city, and no one would challenge him again. The gang leader groaned, struggling to lift himself from the ground. His body ached, and his pride was shattered. His men had abandoned him, disappearing into the shadows, too scared to face what they had just witnessed. The once feared gang had crumbled in a matter of minutes. Malik stood over him for a moment, his expression unreadable. He didn't need to say anything. The message had already been delivered. With a slow, deliberate turn, he adjusted his jacket and walked away. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the silence, growing fainter as he disappeared into the night. By morning, the entire neighborhood had heard the story. People whispered about the lone man who had stood against a gang and won. Fear that had once loomed over the streets was beginning to fade. For the first time in years, the community felt a sense of safety. As for Malik, he never sought recognition. He didn't need thanks or applause. He had done what needed to be done. The gang wouldn't return, not after what had happened. Some battles are fought with fists, but the real victories are won with fear, and Malik had made sure they'd never forget.